you're repping the gear right now. You're repping the USWNT gear. The team is headed to DC. Hopefully they get some decent weather as well, because they're going to continue or close out really this 2-game series against Nigeria. Let's talk a little bit about this first match. United States win the first game in Kansas City 4-0 in this one. So maybe not exactly what we necessarily predicted, or maybe perhaps even anticipated. But something else that we noticed in this game, Lisa, is we saw the same starting lineup as the CONCACAF W Championship final versus Canada. So definitely some familiarity in that aspect. I know this was the 7th meeting overall between these two teams, and there has been that familiarity in terms of like, tightly contested, pretty close matches. There have been like mostly narrow score lines between these two teams in the past. I think the most recent was last year. There was like a 3-1 win. So like maybe a 2-goal margin, but we're talking about a 4-0 score line here. But what were some of your takeaways from this match?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the history between these two sides, it's been tight. And after the U.S. won the CONCACAF W Championship, we talked about it in our initial preview about what we were maybe not expecting to get from this side. When we saw the starting lineups roll out, and it was the exact same one as the CONCACAF W Championship final, I was not surprised. Like this is the team and the 11 players that Vlatko Andonovski wants to lean on moving forward. And I think that's pretty safe to say at this point. So that's Alyssa Nair in goal, Emily Fox in the left back, Becky Sauerbrunn, Alana Cook, Sophia Huerta along the back line, Andy Sullivan, Lindsay Horan, and Rose Lavelle in the midfield, with Mallory Pugh, Alex Morgan, and Sophia Smith in the front line. And we've known this. He's talked about these players and this 11 and this group, specifically the front line, Pugh, Morgan, and Smith, about how they need to find rhythm, how they need to find space and create, and especially with Horan and Lavelle in the midfield underneath of them, how that combination of 5 players, the 2 attacking midfielders and the 3 strikers, the 3 forwards, need to really, really play off of each other. So I wasn't that surprised to see this rotation. I know you and I had talked a little bit about Megan Rapinoe and if she was going to get a start, and I said no. It's not her time to get starts anymore, but she is going to play a role in this team and in this game, and she did. She subs in around the hour mark, just over the hour mark, for Vlatko Andonovski, where he did make a slew of substitutions. All 6 subs that were available to him were used in this game. But in terms of what kind of how this team played and how it rolled out, I was really impressed with how they started. Fast and furious. We know Nigeria is a team that's going to look to go direct, but how can they challenge the United States? And in the first half, the United States controlled the game, right? A lot of the momentum they had, they were getting shots and opportunities in the opening minutes of this match. And ultimately, the goals that did come from this in this 4-0 loss ended up being a number of them in the first half, right? And then closing out with a PK towards the end of this match. But I think that fresh, fast, physical start from the United States is something that is really, really positive and a great step in the right direction. Because when you look at like the overall stats of this team, this was their 70th game unbeaten at home on U.S. soil in this 4-0 win. Alyssa Nair in goal ended up getting her 50th career shutout. There was just a lot of positives that came out of this match, and we can get into it a little bit more, but I'm not at all surprised with the starting lineup that we saw, and impressed with how the U.S. started for sure.
Yeah, I think maybe if I had to look at a top 3 or top 5 even, looking at this game and players who had pretty strong individual performances and 100% like contributed to the scoreline, contributed to the win. I think you're obviously looking at that frontline trio of Smith, Morgan, and Pugh. I just think that they were immediate, quite frankly, like in their impact. And I think maybe extending that to a Lindsay Horan, or extending that to a Rose Lavelle, just sort of seeing the movement between these 5 players in particular, watching moments where even somebody like Smith was dropping a little bit lower at times, when the defensive line was more on the ball, just kind of making sure that there were those extra outlets or options. And it was just good to see, because it's just like, this is the time in which we're likely to see more of it, quite frankly, just because of this whatever months long build up to the World Cup. You want to see these particular players continue to have these very successful games, even if it is this type of scoreline. I know that there's still going to be that unfortunate narrative around this team, right? When you see a scoreline like that, about, hey, like, are they going to be challenged, quote unquote. I'm using like quotations with that, because I sometimes I have like the perceptions around that word for me are like kind of like kind of tough sometimes, because I'm just like, well, I was just like, let's not be disrespectful to like the opposition here, because when you're looking at Nigeria's side of things and the history between these two teams, again, it's like, we're like, hey, like, maybe this is going to be another one of those games where it's like a 2-0. I thought it maybe was going to be like a 2-0, or like a 3-1, and we saw a 4-0. But we're looking at a team a Nigerian side that's coming off of a tournament where they qualified for their World Cup, made it as semifinalists, Africa Cup of Nations. But they had high ambitions of going and winning the whole thing, but then, being taken to penalties and coming into a game like this. So both teams coming off of their like post-July World Cup excursions, but you had this Nigerian side that like had a flurry of injuries, so I had wondered like exactly what type of team we're going to see. So when I saw their starting lineup, like, I was excited to see somebody like Ifeoma Amano be tabbed with the star to maybe go up against some defenders that she has familiarity with, right? And playing with the NWSL. But watching Uchenna Kanu get a start for Nigeria as well, I was like, this is a player that can maybe cause a little bit of havoc. And I think in that first half, she might have been the one Nigerian player who really kind of got like a good look in front of goal. I think either about a half hour in, and at this point, if you're the United States, you're already up like 2-0. It was a tough start for Nigeria, and her shot going a bit wide. But I think at this point, like, it was really just about maybe getting a look at the net, and we didn't maybe see another good opportunity until perhaps that second half. And I think maybe when you're looking at the tail of the tape, maybe you're looking at a second half, if you're Nigeria, as something that was something to work on. Like, that's the momentum that maybe you're going to carry into this DC game.
Oh, for sure.
Because we're talking about, it's like, okay, it's like, well, it's like they were down 3-0 at halftime, and then you're going into the second half and you concede one goal, and the one goal that's conceded is, again, we're talking about this trio of players. But Mallory Pugh, really good both on and off the ball in this match, winning dead ball situations, and one of them was this penalty kick, getting fouled in the box, and this ends up being Alex Morgan's lone goal of the game. It steps up and converts this penalty to give it the 4-0 scoreline. So I think if you're looking at that, you're saying, okay, went from conceding a bunch of goals in this first half, only conceding in the one in the second half. This, like, are we going to see something different from this Nigeria team in this second game? And maybe here's where we transition to DC, Lisa, because we saw this team already come into this first game dealing with a bit of an injury bug, and then they exited this match with only 10 players because they ran out of subs because of continued injuries. So what are you looking to see out of this next DC game from the United States and Nigeria?
I mean, you said so much of it. I think the momentum from the second half of that first game for Nigeria was huge. They pushed players a little bit higher and wider, which put more pressure on the United States back line. So when Nigeria did look to go direct, they had more numbers to compete for that first and second ball. And that put the US under a bit of pressure. Yeah. So if I'm Nigeria, I'm leaning onto that and saying, okay, if we can put numbers higher, yes, it exposes us a little bit in the back, but we can create more chances and opportunities. Then it becomes a bit of a transition game in the sense of getting back and defending in terms of that. But with Nigeria going down a player, I mean, even on the first goal for the U.S. in that match, Michelle Alozie was off the pitch. Yeah. She was getting treated for. So Nigeria was at 10 players at that point. I think that comes down to coaches' management. Like, obviously, you can't dictate when a player is going to get injured, but if you if you use all your subs and then you're down, like that doesn't help Nigeria, which is an incredibly strong team. Heading into the second match for the United States and Nigeria in DC, I don't know about the starting lineup. This is something I was really thinking about. I was like, is he going to do the same thing? Which, if he does, no surprises. Honestly, no surprises. We saw the rotation in the first game was Margaret Person for Sophia Smith, Megan Rapinoe in for Pugh, Ashley Sanchez in for Horan, and then Haley Mason for Fox, who is playing in Kansas City, where she plays for club in the NWSL with the Current. So that was not a surprise at all. I was really happy to see Mace get minutes. And then Christy Muos in for Lavelle and Hatch in for Morgan. So if Vlatko Ananovsky starts with the same starting 11, I'm not going to be surprised. However, I think that we could see a little bit of rotation in terms of like Sanchez in for Horan and Muis in for Lavelle, just like small player rotation, perhaps in that back line as well. I would really like to see Naomi Girma get minutes. Frankly, I want to see her play 90 in this match against DC. I think from what Vlatko Ananovsky has told us in terms of his actions, it's most likely going to be Becky Sauerbrunn and Alana Cook in that back line. But I just think Girma is a player that he cannot sleep on, especially in terms of very, very recent form in NWSL play. Girma has outplayed Cook completely with San Diego Wave. And I want to see her be rewarded for that, get minutes, perhaps get a start in this one. I think we'll see Alyssa Nair still in goal in terms of this game, but in terms of like the goal scoring and how it happened in that first match versus the second half, I think that the United States can build off of that. They found so much success in the wide areas of the pitch, whether it was Smith and Pugh out wide or Fox and Huerta, I think Huerta had a fantastic first game. Can she build upon that? It's now these like individual moments for these players to take what they did particularly well, or maybe something they struggled with, and looking to build on that consistency or grow from that moment where they were. So I think we saw a great game from Smith. Yes, she notched a brace. She had an assist for the Horan goal, but she probably could have had another goal or two. Yeah. So it's those this is the point where this team needs to be incredibly, incredibly nitpicky about. Smith cannot shoot. The one that's coming to mind is when she was on a bit of a breakaway and she shot it right off the post, looking to go to that upper 90. Like, yes, she got in behind. Like, the run was great. The shot was there. She already had 2 goals and an assist at this point. So, like, no, she doesn't need that goal, but that needs to be finished heading into a World Cup year against England in a month's time from now. That goal needs to find the back of the net. And
I'm with you.
Yeah, like it comes down to nitpicking. And I think that Smith is a player that wants to be the best in the world and has her sights set on that. So this is something that the team needs to work on.
It's it's funny to think about. It's like Smith had the game that she had, and then like to sort of like that just comes to mind with like you have those kind of like number 1 team in the world type of problems. It's like that is where the areas in which they're like, we're going to try to target this or go over this. I mean, like even listening to Ananovsky in the post-game comments, like after this particular match, like it's like, hey, like we just won 4-0, but we got to go back and review this game. We got to go back and review it because there are going to be things that we're going to have to look at and work on. And it's like you don't anticipate that maybe a ton of other programs might maybe have that type of mentality, but this one does, and I do wonder, I'm with you in terms of the rotation that we're going to potentially see from game 1 to game 2. I mean, like, do you make Becky Sauerbrunn have like another 90-minute game against Nigeria, and I'm curious about that because I too, like, I think back to the preview that we did of these 2 matches, we both said like, hey, we really want to see Girma getting some time in these games. So I am curious if that's something that's going to be looked at. I mean, there's a number of players on here that you're looking at where you're just like, is player A, B, or C going to go have another second consecutive 90-minute game, like whether it's like a Sauerbrunn or a Sullivan, right? We saw Horan, Smith, Morgan, Pugh, Lavelle, like these players come off, obviously at a certain scheduled time. Does that also make way or pave way or mean that players like Purse or players like Rapinoe, or Sanchez or, Girma, like we're saying, are these the players that are going to be tasked with the start coming off of this type of win that the team just had. So those things I'm curious about, because it's like there's this combination of like, yes, you want to have these players together, making sure they're continuing to get as many minutes under their belt and having that type of establishing that type of chemistry in the lead up to the World Cup, while also keeping an eye on those matches ahead of you, like
Mhm.
they have
Yeah.
the games in Europe coming up, while also keeping an eye on players who might be returning into the fold, from injury and maternity leave, like Crystal Dunn is someone who's been participating in in trainings here. So there's like all these things and decisions that like you probably have to take a look at in terms of the landscapes of things if you're the coaching staff. I'm not envious of their position on
No.
having to make those decisions. We get to come here on the show and question them and think about them hypothetically. But I'm eager to see with that in particular, that if that
Right.
most immediate change is going to happen, like who are the players who are not going to be tasked with going in a second consecutive 90 minutes, you know?
I mean, you mentioned a player like Becky Sauerbrunn, like, she can for sure do it, but it's more about giving the opportunity to
Yeah.
Naomi Girma and, like, can
You
she
you
play
already
alongside
saw
Cook?
Yeah, you already
Right,
saw Becky Sauerbrunn against Nigeria for a whole
right.
90 minutes. You saw the scoreline. It's like, do you need to see that again? So
Yes.
I'm curious about that, and I'm hopeful that it's the latter, so that we get to see
I know, me
get
too.
to see Girma in action.
For
But
sure, but in this second match, there are some notables. Alex Morgan sits on 119 goals right now, so if she scores in the second match, she'll be at 120. Mallory Pugh, she, all-time with the US, she has 24 goals and 27 assists. So she's right on the cusp of scoring 25 goals, 25 assists, over 25 assists in her US career before the age of 25. I think she turns 25 in April. So she has a couple more matches to do it for the US, but those are just a number of like notables that heading into this game for fans to keep an eye on.
all right, we'll be keeping an eye on it too in case
You
we
know
have
I
to.
like my stats, Sandra.
We'll be keeping an eye on that too in case we need to chat about it in the next episode.